I was standing in the driveway, keys still in my hand, when my phone buzzed. I almost didn't answer. It was a Saturday morning in late October, the kind of cold that settles into your bones before you even step outside, and I had been running late for my brother-in-law's retirement breakfast across town. I glanced at the screen. An unfamiliar number. I almost let it go to voicemail. I picked up. "Mr. Callahan?" The voice on the other end was low, careful. "This is Wade Thibodeau. I'm the electrician your daughter-in-law hired to rewire the garage. I think you need to come back inside. But sir, please come alone." I stood there in the cold for a moment, the fog of my own breath hanging in front of me. My wife, Carol, had been gone for 7 months. 7 months since the funeral in Guelph, since the casseroles from neighbors, since the silence that swallowed our house whole. The garage had been her project. She was always more handy than me, always had some plan for converting it into a proper workshop. After she passed, my son Marcus and his wife Diane had offered to finish what Carol started. A gift, they said, something to honor her memory. I turned around and walked back inside. Wade was a compact man in his 50s, with a gray beard and careful eyes. He was standing near the far wall of the garage, the one that ran along the back of the house. A section of drywall had been cut away, exposing the framing and insulation behind it. He wasn't looking at the wiring. He was looking at a metal box, roughly the size of a shoebox, wedged between 2 studs and wrapped in a plastic bag. "I wasn't snooping," he said immediately. "I had to open the wall to run the new circuit. It was just sitting there." "Did you open it?" I asked. "No, sir. It's got a combination lock, but I could see the initials on the side," he pointed. I stepped closer. On the lid of the box, scratched carefully into the metal, were 2 letters. C.M. Carol Mackenzie Callahan. My wife had hidden something in the wall of her own garage, and she had never told me. I want to be honest about what I felt in that moment. It wasn't betrayal. Not right away. Carol and I had been married for 31 years. We met in our 2nd year at the University of Waterloo in 1987. I was studying engineering. She was in environmental science, and she corrected my lab report in the library, and somehow that became coffee, and then dinner, and then a life. We had Marcus in 1993. We bought the house in Guelph in 1996. I knew the sound of her breathing when she slept. I knew she cried at nature documentaries and pretended she hadn't. I knew she kept a journal every year but never let me read it. What I felt standing in that garage was not betrayal. It was the cold, specific fear that my wife had known something I didn't, and that she had needed to hide it from someone. The lock on the box had 4 digits. I tried our anniversary, our son's birthday, the year we bought the house. Nothing worked. I carried the box inside and set it on the kitchen table. Wade had gone quiet and professional, finishing his work without another word. When he left, he pressed a card into my hand and said, "I hope it's nothing. But if it turns out to be something, you should talk to someone before you talk to your family." I didn't understand what he meant until 2 weeks later. The combination, I eventually realized, was 1987, the year Carol and I met. Inside the box was a small notebook, a USB drive, a prescription bottle with a handwritten label I didn't recognize, and a folded letter in Carol's handwriting, addressed to me. I sat down. I read the letter. "My darling Robert," it began. "If you're reading this, then something happened to me before I could tell you in person. I need you to know that I tried to protect you. I need you to know that what I am about to tell you is not your fault, and I need you to promise me before you do anything that you will be careful." Carol had become sick the previous spring. Not the kind of sick that announces itself with drama, the quiet kind. The kind that starts with fatigue and headaches and a strange metallic taste in your mouth that you mention to your doctor, and your doctor sends you for blood work, and the blood work comes back slightly abnormal but not alarming, and so you wait. She had mentioned the fatigue to me. I had told her to take her iron supplements. She had not told me what she actually suspected. In her letter, she wrote that she had begun to suspect, around March of last year, that her supplements were not what they appeared to be. She had started a new brand in January, a bottle that Diane had given her as a Christmas gift, along with a card that said something about women over 60 needing better nutritional support. Carol had thought nothing of it. Diane was always sending wellness products, always forwarding articles about gut health and sleep hygiene. It was just how she was. But by February, Carol's hands had started shaking. By March, she was losing weight without trying and waking up with headaches that took hours to lift. She went to a second doctor, a GP in Hamilton she'd found through a friend, without telling me. She brought the supplement bottle. She asked for a full panel, including heavy metals. The results had come back in April. She wrote, "The doctor told me there were elevated levels of thallium in my blood." Thallium, Robert. I had to look it up. It's a heavy metal. It's odorless and tasteless. It accumulates slowly. It's almost impossible to detect unless a doctor specifically looks for it. If I had kept taking those supplements, by summer I likely would have been an organ failure. I stopped the supplements immediately and told no one. I started a new course of treatment under my Hamilton doctor's care. The levels began to drop. By June I was feeling better. I had the bottle tested independently. The results confirmed it. Someone had tampered with the capsules. I had to read that paragraph 3 times. She wrote, "I don't know how to tell you this. I know how much you love Marcus. I know you would not want to believe this. But the supplements came from Diane. And Marcus had been under enormous financial pressure for more than a year, pressure he had hidden from us both. I found bank statements. Robert, I found correspondence. Please look at the USB drive. I have copied everything. Your life insurance is substantial, and your estate would pass to Marcus entirely without a will. We have no will, Robert. We talked about it and kept putting it off. Please do not let another day pass without calling a lawyer." I could not move for a very long time. Carol had spent the last months of her life gathering evidence against our son's wife. She had done it quietly and carefully, and alone because she loved me too much to destroy me before she had proof. And then, in September, she had suffered a sudden cardiac event in the kitchen, and she had died on a Wednesday afternoon while I was at a hardware store buying weather stripping for the back door, and she had never gotten to tell me any of it. The cardiac event, her regular cardiologist had assured me, was consistent with her history of mild arrhythmia. There had been no autopsy. There had been no reason for one. There was one more line at the bottom of the letter. It read, "I left the notebook and the drive in the wall because I did not trust the house anymore. Not since I found the camera. I found the camera that same evening. It was in the smoke detector in the hallway outside our bedroom, the one Diane had replaced for us last spring when she said the battery was dying. It was a small wireless device, no larger than a button. It had a viewing angle that covered the bedroom door and the top of the staircase. Someone had been watching us in our own home. I did not sleep that night. I sat at the kitchen table with Carol's notebook open in front of me, and I read every page. She had been methodical. She had photographed the bank statements she found transfers out of a joint account Marcus and I had kept for the business I'd retired from. Transfers I had assumed were authorized. She had printed emails between Marcus and a man named Gord Fleury, someone I vaguely recognized as an old friend of Marcus's from his time in Calgary. The emails discussed a debt, a significant one, and they discussed a timeline. The phrase that appeared in one email, dated the previous November, was this: "Once the old man's estate clears, we're clear." Once the old man's estate clears. I want to tell you something about the weeks that followed. I want to be honest about how disorienting it is to look at your son, a man you held in your arms the night he was born, whose hockey games you drove to in the dark, whose university tuition you paid, who cried at Carol's funeral with his face in his hands, and understand that he had been complicit in something monstrous. I had to look at Marcus across a dinner table and pass him the bread basket and ask about his work and listen to him talk about renovating their condo in Mississauga. And I had to do all of it, knowing what I knew, because the moment I said something, whatever evidence Carol had gathered could be buried, denied, or destroyed. I called a lawyer first, a woman named Patricia Reyes, a wills and estates specialist in Guelph, whom a colleague had recommended years ago. I went to her office on a Tuesday, and I put Carol's notebook and the USB drive on her desk, and I told her everything. Patricia sat very still while I talked. When I finished, she said 2 things. First, she said we were creating a will that afternoon, naming her as executor, and leaving nothing to Marcus or Diane pending investigation. Second, she said I needed to speak to a detective. The detective's name was Colin Ibarra. He worked out of the OPP detachment in Wellington County, and he had a quiet, unhurried manner that I found steadying. He listened to everything I said over 2 hours in a windowless room. He looked at the USB drive. He looked at the prescription bottle, which he bagged immediately. He said he wanted to move carefully, and he asked me to do something very difficult. He asked me to continue behaving normally around Marcus and Diane until he told me otherwise. I said I would try. 3 weeks passed. Colin and his team worked quietly. They traced the supplement bottle to an online purchase made from a credit card in Diane's name. They subpoenaed Marcus's financial records and found a pattern of withdrawals and transfers that painted a very clear picture. Marcus had borrowed heavily from an investment scheme in 2021 and lost nearly everything. He had been managing it by taking small amounts from a joint account Carol and I had not actively monitored. By the fall of last year, the debt to Gord Fleury had reached a number that made my stomach drop. The agreement, as best as the investigators could piece it together, was that Fleury would be repaid from the estate. They found records indicating Diane had researched thallium compounds and their sources online over a period of 6 months, using a private browsing mode she had apparently believed would be untraceable. It is not untraceable. Colin came to my house on a Thursday morning in early December. He sat across from me at the same kitchen table where I had read Carol's letter, and he told me they were ready to move. He asked if I was all right. I told him I didn't know. He nodded and said that was a reasonable answer. The following Monday, Marcus and Diane were arrested at their condo in Mississauga. Gord Fleury was arrested the same morning at his home in Airdrie, Alberta. Marcus's lawyer issued a statement within 24 hours, indicating that his client intended to cooperate fully with investigators. That phrase, intended to cooperate fully, broke something open in me. It meant he was going to confirm it. He was going to sit in a room and say yes. He had known. Yes, he had been aware. Yes, the plan had been real. I don't tell people this often, but the hardest day was not the day of the arrest. The hardest day was a Tuesday about a week later, when I was in the garage, Carol's garage, and I found one more thing tucked behind the metal box, pushed further back between the studs where I hadn't seen it before. It was a small envelope with my name on it, and inside was a photograph of the two of us from our trip to Cape Breton in the summer of 2018. Carol was laughing at something off camera, and I had my arm around her, and the ocean was behind us, and the light was late afternoon gold and perfect. On the back, she had written 4 words, "You were always enough." I sat down on the cold concrete floor of that garage, and I held that photograph for a long time. Diane Callahan was charged with administering a noxious substance, criminal harassment, and conspiracy. Marcus was charged with fraud over $5,000 and conspiracy. Their trial is scheduled for the spring. Gord Fleury has already entered a guilty plea in exchange for testimony. My will is now in order. The house is in order. I have had every remaining smoke detector and light switch and appliance in my home inspected and cleared. I have changed the locks and the alarm codes. I have started seeing a grief counselor in Guelph, a kind man named David Park, who told me in our second session that what I was experiencing was not just grief for Carol, but grief for the version of my son I thought I had raised, and that both losses were real, and both deserved to be mourned properly. He is right. I am 62 years old. I spent most of this past year feeling like a man moving through water, heavy and slow, and unsure of the ground beneath my feet. But I want to say something to anyone who is reading or listening to this. I want to say it clearly. Carol did not give up. When she found herself in danger, when she understood what was happening to her and who was behind it, she did not fall apart, and she did not do nothing. She gathered evidence with the patience and care of someone who still believed that the truth would matter. She protected me from beyond a wall, from beyond her own life. She thought of me even when she was frightened. She thought of the future even when she wasn't sure she would be in it. That kind of love is not soft. That kind of love is a form of courage. What Carol faced in those last months taught me something I carry with me now. When something in your life feels quietly wrong, a financial account that doesn't add up, a gift that arrives a little too thoughtfully, a concern you keep dismissing because confronting it would mean confronting someone you love, do not wait. Do not tell yourself you are being paranoid. Make the call. See the second doctor. Talk to the lawyer. Trust the discomfort. The people who love us most are rarely the ones trying to silence our instincts. Get your affairs in order. Not because you are planning for death, but because having a will, knowing your accounts, understanding your estate, is an act of love toward the people you'll leave behind, and a form of protection for yourself while you're still here. Carol and I had discussed a will for years. We had put it off the way people put off difficult conversations, the way we pretend time is unlimited. That delay nearly cost me everything. And if you ever find yourself sitting across a table from someone you once trusted completely, watching them speak, and wondering whether the person you knew was ever fully real, I want you to know that grief is the right response to that. Let yourself grieve it. And then, when you are ready, let Wade Thibodeau's advice guide you. Before you talk to your family, talk to someone first. Carol was 60 years old. She liked the CBC, strong tea, and terrible puns. She corrected my lab report in a university library in 1987, and somehow that became everything. I am going to spend the rest of my life being grateful that she hid that box in the wall. I am going to spend the rest of my life trying to be half as brave as she was. She was always enough, too. I just didn't think to write it down while I still had the chance.